Although it isn't one of the more exciting topics, it is helpful to talk about the mechanics of APA-style citations and references at this point. Understanding when and how to use them will be important as we compile knowledge for our research question. After seeing all the citations in the articles we've looked at and realizing we have a whole section about citations and references, you might be wondering why we go to so much trouble. The reason for the citations and references is related to ideas I mentioned in past units. They help us give credit where credit is due and help us locate the primary source. But why all the trouble with formatting? The consistency makes it easier to identify the information we need, like we talked about with the content. Sometimes I joke that it's also like the secret decoder ring for academics. If you can format things according to their style, you can be in the club. Citations are like the shorthand we need to locate more detailed information in the corresponding entry in the References section. The References entry includes all of the details we need to find a source. Another way to think about it is that the citations are like a sign pointing us in the right direction, and references are like a map telling us exactly how to get there. Note that the formatting for citations depends on two variables: how many the articles the author had and whether the citation will be in text or in parentheses at the end. When we say in text, we're talking about situations where we directly refer to the work as part of the narrative. For example, Francis 2014 outlined. Parenthetical formatting is used to give credit, provide support when making a statement based on information from the source. Aside from the placement of parentheses, the two formats vary when there is more than one author. We spell out AND in text, but abbreviate with the ampersand or the and sign in parentheses. Note that this slide and the guide for this section includes a copy of the table of the APA style manual. I did not reformat it to avoid any potential confusion. You'll want to start by finding the right row in the table, or the correct row in the table, depending on the number of authors, and then going to the column that fits your use. The word subsequent means not the first time. In other words, those columns will tell us how to format citations when we've cited the article once before. If the table seems a little confusing, here's another way to think about it. Here is an example of what a citation for the same article would look like for text and parenthetical uses. Note that the period follows the parenthetical citation. A reference answers 4 questions. Who wrote it? When was it written? What was the title? Where was it published? Each of the components answered those questions has unique formatting. Note, too, that the publication and other forms have different formatting. Once you get the idea of the journal article reference, the differences for books and other types of sources should be easy to spot. There are 3 important formatting notes for the author section of a reference. First, we do not type out middle names. We use the full last name followed by a comma, and the first initial followed by a period, and if applicable, the middle initial followed by a period. Second, if there is more than 1 and less than 8 authors, we separate each name by a comma and use an ampersand before the last author's last name. The names stay in the order they're listed in the publication. Third, if there are more than 8 authors, we list the first 6 using the same punctuation as above, but insert 3 ellipses, otherwise known as ... and add the last author's name. Some authors won't be listed, and there's not an ampersand or an AND. Remember that we're focusing on formatting for journal articles. In that case, we just use the year in parentheses, following the author names. Note that we have specific guidelines for capitalization in article titles. The majority of the words in a title will be lowercase. Where was it published? Answering this question obviously requires a little more information. It's easier now that things are electronic, but having all the details makes it more efficient. We can think about the where was it published information in 4 parts. First, the name of the journal. Note that it's italicized and followed by an italicized comma. We capitalize all major words, which means of is not capitalized, or other 2-letter words. The second component is the volume number. It is also italicized and followed by an italicized comma. Publications are also identified by an issue number. That number is only used when each issue of a journal begins on page 1. Note the blog post from the APA Style blog for more details. The third component is the page numbers, which are not italicized and are followed by a period. Note that we just include the numbers and a dash for the journal articles. The fourth component is a relatively new addition in the publication process and is called the DOI for short. That stands for Digital Object Identifier. It is typically available for newer articles and is included immediately after the page number, though it's so long that some examples make it look like it should be on its own line. We compile the references in the References section. That section will include an entry for each of the citations and only entries for the citations. Those entries are in alphabetical order by the last name of the first author. They are also double-spaced with a hanging indent. We'll work more with that formatting later.